planning. Well, you know, why are we here? Why are we doing this? That's planning grid. You know, Benjamin Franklin, I like to use this one, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Well, you need to be able to plan resources and expenses in Unanet with that portfolio license to be able to project what your costs are going to be, project what the budget of hours is going to be, to project what the potential revenue, projected revenue might be, project what your profitability is going to be on this contract or project. So to be able to do that, we have this feature called the Planning Grid that's available for multiple projects or just your one project in Unanet. And you can schedule resources, you can schedule expenses, plan those expenses, you can know who is available from your team and when they are available, when are they booked, when are they overbooked or underbooked, who's on the bench ready to go, who has the right skill set, who has the certifications that you need, who speaks the right languages for the work that you need to have done, who has the right development skills to get the job done, who has a certain training skills to get the job done. There's also the ability to plan for those resources that you might not have hired yet, and we have that, and I'll talk about that a little bit today, those TBD or planning resources. They're not a named resource just yet, but you can fill their spot or hold their spot in the plan. And also, again, to review the hours, cost, revenue, and profit for those projects with those resources and expenses. So it's important to really know that you have the ability to do all of that in Unanet, and once you decide on that baseline plan, then you can assign and authorize those users to start working, and that becomes your budget or your forecast, and then they can charge time in your timesheets, charge your expenses, and you can track all of that. So okay, good. So how to use the planning grid. So I'm going to talk today, first of all, with roles, about roles. The roles is very important, and the organizational access. So I'll briefly talk about that. What role do you need to have? There's a couple of key points there that I wanted to point out. You know, what is a plan? You know, what are the options for the plan? That's important to know what a plan really is. So I'll talk a bit about that. With the grid options, there's hours, FTE, how do you identify resources that are named, how to use TBDs, how do you show current utilization in that, availability with the colorized grid. And then finally, probably what I think is the most important thing is how do you report on what you've just put into that plan? What reports can show that plan? That's really the important thing. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I got a few little visuals here to talk about that I forgot I had here. So we'll move on. I still see a ton of people joining the webinar, so I do want to go ahead and get started with the actual content here. So let's talk about the right role or roles and org access. So one of the first things that I wanted to say is this Unisource user role. That's important because you want to have every users in your system that you potentially might plan in the planning grid or plan with a search. They need to have this Unisource user role. It really does mean that I can plan, I'm available to be planned on in the planning grid. So that's really important to show there. The other idea here that I wanted to point out is this resource planner. That's really important as well, because to be able to see the planning grid or have the option to look at plans at the project level or the forecast planner, that planner, whether it's the project manager or maybe a centralized planning group at your company, they need to have that resource planner role to be able to plan in the system. So that's really key. And right above that is that resource assigner role. To be able to assign people, you have to have the resource assigner role. Now, along with that is the organizational access, to have access to the projects that you're going to plan and who are those people, resources that you are going to plan, having access to those groups of people. So I'll show that in the system here shortly. So let's see. Actually, let's go take a look at that now. Let me switch over to my demo system. I see a number of people are still logging in here. So I'm in my demo system now, and I wanted to show an example of a couple of people here. I'm going to go to a resource here. Let's go to Tom Brokaw. He's a project manager in my demo system here, and let's look at his roles that he has set. So the key thing here is, one, this Unisource user role, and by hovering over or clicking in this eye here, oh, I don't have pop-ups on my screen right now. So you can look and see, you should be able to look into this little eye icon. It tells you what that role is for. Oh, there it is right now. Plans can be created for these users. So that's important to note, that if you're potentially going to be planning a resource, that they need to have this checked. Normally I'd advise the administrator, when you're creating a brand new employee in your system, or a subcontractor or user in your system, that along with being an expense user and timesheet user, what I call a worker bee, you'd also want to check the Unisource user role, so they would be able to plan that accordingly down the road and for projects. The other key thing here is this organizational access. So from the administrator's point of view, clicking into that organizational access, it's important to note here the resource planner, these two lines here, because this is what's enabling that resource planner to have access to people in the Unanet system and projects in the Unanet system. And right now you can see that they don't have access. Tom Brokaw, he doesn't have access to any people to plan or projects to plan. So if I logged in as Tom Brokaw, that planning area on the project would not come up at all. So I need to allow access to give them to a group of people to plan, and I can do that by clicking into here and either selecting a group of people, and my people are in my company here, so I could select engineering, or I could select some subset, maybe just the engineering north people. So I have the option to be very selective in the groups of people that I'd want to plan for the planning grid. You know, for our purposes today, I'll open it up to my few people and say all access to all organizations in the system. So if I look at that org access again, you'll see Resource Planner, I now have access to all the people in my Unanet demo system. But even though I've got access to all the people, I have yet to have access to any projects in the system, other than the fact that I might be a project manager on some projects directly via the administrator role at the project, you know, at the project itself, project access. So I need to open up a little bit for either selected projects in my system, maybe customer 1, customer 2, customer 3, those customers. We'll go with that for now, and gave access to Tom Brokaw. And if I look back again, organizational access, you can see here I've given specific access to these project organizations. In general, as a best practice, project organizations are typically customers in Unanet. So now I have the right roles and access to some people and projects to be able to plan and use that planning grid. So hopefully that makes sense. It's really important and kind of a tougher concept to really understand the roles in org access. So Unisource role and the resource planner role. Now, the idea of planning for people that you haven't hired yet, that's what we call TBD planning, or TBD resources. And here, this is a different type of licensing, and we can designate that role as, designate this as a TBD planning resource. And typically, it's got obviously the Unisource user role to be able to show up in the planning grid, and it's also a TBD license, which is different from an active license that a named user would log into. So you can check that in your system if you go to the About page and you look at the type of licensing here. The license product is going to be called the Project Portfolio Plus. That plus is the ability to show that you can have Unisource users only, the TBD users, and right now you can see that my old demo system has 50 of them in it. So, and it's been changed on the expiration. So now the other key thing is setting up those TBD users or TBD licenses here. One best practice that we have is to have a grouping, person, organization, or grouping, and here you can see I have one under the TBD group of people, my TBD licenses, and I've named them for searching ease to have the last name of TBD, and then I've named the first name to be whatever labor category that I want to represent in my system. So here I've got business analyst, and if I clicked into there it would be the labor category business analyst and a billing rate of what that business analyst might charge for a time and materials project. Now normally they're not users that you would log into, but they're placeholders for that planning grid to be able to project budget of hours, projection of costs, projection of revenue, and even profit. So good to be able to have those available, set up in your system. So to be able to show those in the person list, you do have to make an adjustment in the search criteria to include TBD resources only or to include those TBD resources altogether. So let's take a look at what that looks like in my demo system. So if I go to my people list here and just list, again, you know, these are all of my active people in the system. So to look at the TBD users, you know, that additional criteria is right here. I want to be able to look at including the TBD planning resources or including just them. So let me just include just my TBD resources in my demo system. And you can see here they are, they're the TBDs, and you can see that they're associated with my person organization TBD. Now let's just take a look at one of them, this TBD Business Analyst, and you can see here under the roles, again, he's modified, or he's checked as a Unisource user role, and also this designate this user as a TBD planning resource. That says I'm going to use up one of those TBD resources that are about 1/3 of the cost of a normal licensing, and it's going to be reserved for someone that I may hire in the future, should hire in the future. So associated with that would be the labor category and then some billing rate associated with that, what that labor category would be charging for planning purposes. Okay. Oh, I wanted to also show, hopefully I've got some skills set up for this one, the skills idea, and I'm going to talk about that in the PowerPoint again, but I wanted to show an example of skills being associated with a TBD user, which is the same way as a normal user. And here I've got the situation where I've got language, German, and I've got the ability to have programming, advanced Java programming skills. So that's set up at the person profile as well, and can be for not only the TBD users, but your employees as well. So that's the TBD user licensing. Any questions so far? How are we doing, Zoe?
Hi, Sherry. No questions so far.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the skills. Now the skills functionality or feature, that's available with the project portfolio license as well. We have 3 sections or groupings for skills and defining those skills. The first is the skill level. Now this can be defined however is reflective of your business policies in your Unanet. I typically like to think of this as a person's resume or their personal inventory. So what I've defined here as my skill levels and skill types and skills, you can have something very, very different defined in your system. But here's just an example of how it could be done. And you can get as creative as possible. You can see my skill levels, beginner, intermediate. This text here is the full description of what I think defines beginner based on how many years experienced. You can see I can have a really advanced Jedi Knight here for over 30 years experience, so, and a master here. So that's the different levels of skills. The next would be the skill types, and the skill types are of that type of skill. You know, is it certifications? Is it languages? Is it databases? Is it programming languages? Is it technology training, etc.? So the grouping is the skill type, and then when you come into the skill itself, you can see here for that type of certification, I have many different skills that make up the types of certifications. I can have many different languages that make up certifications. I can the language skill type. And then I can associate it to be the appropriate level, skill level for that skill and that skill type. And that altogether would make up the personal inventory, that resume. So let's take a look at where that is set up. That is something that's set up by the administrator in your system. So again, this is an example. Here we've got the first skill types here that are in the system, and then the skills, skill levels. You can see here are my examples of the different skill levels. And then finally the different skills in my system, you know, for the certifications programming skill types and databases, languages, etc. And then when you go back to that person, you look at a person here. We'll just look at Brokaw again. That's associated at the skills level here, and you would select whatever skill it is. If I've got an MBA here, whatever skill level it is, and then move it over to the right-hand side. And this can be used when we are identifying resources for our planning grid or our assignments, looking for those resources, okay? All right. Does that make sense? Any questions on skills and setting up skills? Let me show a great Knowledge Center entry for skills. And we have an example CSV file that you could import as an example. So let me look up a skill. So I think I have best practice for setup of resource skills here. So there's an entry here, setting up skills and skill types. It has a great, some visuals here and as examples, and some example CSV files that you could import in to get a start of how things could be, and then you can certainly modify those skills and types and levels, but it's a great, you know, it's a great start to kind of think about and get you started to think about what's that personal inventory that you would need to represent your employees. Okay. So we're okay, Zoe? Any questions so far?
We're doing good, Sherry. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. Okay, so what is a plan? I like to talk about the definition of what a plan is in Unanet because it can be, it's a terminology that we use in the system and maybe not everybody knows about what that plan is. When I talk about a plan in Unanet, it's a soft booking or a tentative assignment of resources and expenses, could be expenses as well, to the project, which is different from budget. And when we talk about budget in this context, it's the resource assignment, which creates a budget. The budget's those, you know, hours that are associated with that resource assignment. It's the actual assignment, it's a hard booking. The key is, the difference is that the budget or resource assignment is the authorization for that person to charge time in their timesheet or to create an expense report against that project. So the plan is the soft booking, and then the budget or resource assignment, that's the hard booking authorization of time. And then again, actuals are the hours charged in the timesheet or, you know, expenses charged in the expense report. Okay, so just want to talk about that because you're going to see some of these options in the reporting options. Plan, you know, don't look at plans versus budgets versus actuals or all three. The plans is soft booking, budgets hard booking, actuals baseline. Some customers use different types of terminology. Some of you might use baseline versus forecast versus actual, or even maybe the plan might be the forecast and then the budget's the baseline that you would go back and modify. So again, your terminology may be very different, but in Unanet terms, the plan soft booking, the budget's the hard booking, authorization to charge time versus actuals. So hopefully that helps to clear up some terminology. So identifying resources, well, there's many different ways to identify what resources that you want to pull into your planning scenario here. There's actual named resources. If I know that I want to have Tom Brokaw pulled in, I would name him. Or maybe there's an organization, a team, a person organization, or a team, your IT team, or your PMO team, or your developer team, or your engineering team that you might pull up, and then all the people that are associated with that person or organization, you would, you know, select which ones or maybe all of them. You can also plan by named labor categories or a group of named labor categories, representative of those who might have the business analyst labor category, and all those people that have that labor category in their person profile would show up in the grid, or maybe technicians, or maybe developer. In addition, the location, you can maybe look for people that are located in Florida versus Dulles, Virginia, or California, because you know you have work to do at the customer site, so you want to look to see who you can put on the project, plan on the project that's local to that customer work. And then finally, a combination of skills. We've talked about the skills. You know, if there's a skill certification, set of certifications, Java programming, etc., I might want to identify resources that have that specific type of skill to be able to put on that job. Okay, so there's a lot of different options here to identify who it is you're going to plan. What is that resource you're going to plan? So the other thing is the options for planning. So here, you know, we have many different options for planning in Unanet. And so you have to kind of think about, you know, when you're planning your projects, do you have multiple projects that make up a contract? So you'd have multiple different types of labor that you'd want to plan for. So you can plan for multiple projects under the Forecast People Planner, and it can be for multiple groups of people, multiple people. So, so that's one thing. Or you can plan multiple people back for the multiple projects. So you would select for people and then at that point ask for the multiple projects. So you can do both ways. The other thing is planning at the particular project level. That's under when you go to a project and you have the resource planner role and access for that project, you can on the left-hand side have the plan area there, and then you have the list of plans and also the planning with the grid. So you could plan one project for those multiple people, select those multiple people or identify multiple people, or you have the option if you have a work breakdown structure, tasks identified on that project, you can plan for those multiple tasks for those multiple people. So hopefully you're following along here. Now you can also plan multiple people for those tasks, and I'll show you the difference of what the planning grid looks like in both of these scenarios here. So there's a lot of different options, levels of planning, and levels of granularity for your planning. My recommendation is to think about the level of how you want your users to charge time. Do you want them to charge time at a task level, at a lower task level, or at a higher task level? Because you can certainly have, you know, a hierarchy of tasks. Do you want them to charge time at the project level? So think about that, because then you can easily plan at the right level that you want your users to charge time in their timesheet and the view that they're going to have in their timesheet, and then you can automatically assign them based on the plan, and then the authorization to charge time, that budget or resource assignment, will be at that same level, and it makes it very easy. So this is something to think about with the planning option. You also want to consider the planning period. Is it a date range? Do you want to plan by month or by week or by pay period, or the whole POP, the whole period of performance of that project or contract? So a best practice that Unanet would recommend to you is to plan your technical resources by the pay period, so you can monitor for every pay period when you get those timesheets in to look to see, well, what does that plan look like compared to what the actuals are based on the pay period, and you know that you can check in, you know, every pay period, whether it's weekly or semi-monthly, etc. The other idea is for, you know, maybe your PMs that have to work on the project the whole way of the period of performance. You might put them on period performance or just like have time for the duration of that project, because they're going to work on a, you know, just a range of hours for the entire project. The other option is, you know, how are you going to budget or plan those hours? Is it going to be based on hours, or is it going to be based on a percentage, a full-time equivalent, an FTE, half-time, 0.5, or full-time, which is 1, or maybe you have a gearing up, ramping up, and a ramping down, so you 0.5, 0.75 to 1, or back down again. And you can also plan for labor categories or your TBDs, and maybe you have, you know, you've got to hire 3 people that are developers, so you can put a 3 FTE as a placeholder, so you can look at the cost projections and look at the revenue projections for 3 developers that you need to hire in the future. So again, lots of options, lots of flexibility here for that. So this is what the planning grid, an example of a planning grid might look like. It's a matrix for the period of time. You can see here I've got, you know, by month here. I've got the range of the project here and the budget of hours overall at the project. And here are my different TBDs, my subs that I might have the option to plan in the row or in the column which is the period, or the entire matrix filling in hours for everyone here. So that's just an example of the many options we do for the planning grid. When you click into a cell or a row or a column, you have the option here to specify the hours or the FTE, depending on which option, and also select the rates associated, so you can do some costing analysis for that plan or that baseline. You might override the bill rate based on the labor category, or override it altogether if you're doing some pricing out. Typically the contract will, mandate a bill rate that you'd want to have, especially for government contracts in that GSA schedule. Your cost rate, typically you'd want to have from your cost, your person profile, the cost, that's their person's salary, right? So you want to make sure you're taking that from that person profile's cost rate. So this is the option to override different costing areas and also put in the number of hours or an FTE. So let's go back and take a look at that in our Unanet system here. So I wanted to show first the idea of planning for multiple projects here. Typically that's under the forecast. I'm able to save a view, which is a list of the planning grid, and it's really the way you want to go is once you finalize the options that you have for your planning grid, you'd want to save that to a project list or your home dashboard list. Here I'm going to click into my planner under my list section, and when I do, I have set up for a series of projects and at the task level a current plan that I have in the system for a couple of projects here. So this is under the forecast that people planner, and this is a saved list that I already have in place of plans. And it's great because you can see for each for the project itself, I've got the date range of that project, how many hours I have budgeted at the project level. I have the task date range here, and it happens to be linked to the project. And I have George Washington planned to work by month, the 20 hours. And I'm showing my booked percentage here. Now this threshold you can change in the grid planner to show, if your business policy is green when it's 85 to 100%, you can certainly change it. You can change the color, if this negative less than 50% is red, then you maybe want to change that one to red and this one to green and that to yellow. So you have the option to change all of that. So this is for this is the second project here for training, and you can see here I have multiple projects here that I can save, and when I search for it, I could reselect different projects here if I wanted to pull in, different projects that you might have in your system. And then you can save that to your, dashboard for that listing, and then all the criteria that is important to you to look at that plan in that way and search for people in that way, you can save that listing off. Okay, so again, that's under the forecast people planner. This is the people planner here. So for multiple projects, you can see here in the plan view, it's multiple projects for many people. It's projects and people maybe just for one period, maybe for 1 month or maybe for 1 quarter, or it could be many people for many projects, kind of a pivot of that grid. So let's go to a particular project. I'm going to go to a brand new project and go plan now at the particular project. So let's go and look at my, I have some government scanning projects here. I'm going to look at this one here. I don't have any plans or assignments or anything in here yet. So if I go to my people plans and list, I have nothing here, nor do I have anything under my assignments. So it's a brand new project that I want to plan some resources on. So to be able to have access to this people plan area and the plan with grid, I need to have that resource planner role that I showed at the beginning, and I would need to have access to this project organization. For me, it's the customer of NC Sparta. Okay, so I'd have to have access for that. So here are the different options for this grid here. So let's talk about that. The plan sets, we have the option to do what-if scenarios here. So I could have, scenario 1 with junior developers, maybe scenario 2 with senior developers, and maybe scenario 3 with subcontractors or something. So I'll talk about that a little bit on our next webinar, which is in 2 weeks from tomorrow. We're going to kind of take the idea of the planning grid and create a cost proposal with the planning grid. And so I will extrapolate the mechanics of the planning grid for next week's 2 weeks webinar on the cost proposal, creating a cost proposal, responding to an RFP. We're using this planning grid. The project, again, remember we talked about the project, we have tasks for many people, people for many tasks, or planning at the project level here. So let's take a look and let's maybe do, people for many tasks here. Let's make it, pretty intricate. So the planning period, so this is what you want to think about, is it a period by period plan? Do you want to plan month over month? Do you want to plan week over week? We do have as a best practice that you might want to plan, on the time periods or the pay periods that you have for your system. So that that's semi-monthly or if that's weekly or whatever that is for your pay period, you might represent here as well. And so the other option is the period of performance, the POP. That is the duration of the task dates or the duration of the project dates if you're planning by the project. So it's really the way to think about that is you might want to use the period of performance if you just know that project manager is going to work 20 hours a month. He can work on it anytime he wants to during that month, and it just will be kind of this bucket of hours over the course of the project. So maybe you want to give him 160 hours to use over the course of the 3-month project. Versus the semi-month here where you want to be more specific about, okay, in this pay period, this time period, I think we're going to have a ramp-up time. We're going to do 20 hours, and maybe the next pay period, the last half of the month, we're going to step up to 30 hours. So if that date range, during the period it ramps up or ramps down and it varies, then you might want to do over a period over period. So we'll do semi-month here because I think a lot of my little users are on the time period of semi-monthly. So again, this is the number of periods that you want to look at, and in mine I think I have, it's a project that's through 3 months here, so that's probably going to cover, let's do 7 right here to do, it covers over an overlay going into September. Starting with the month 6/1. And here's where you select whether you want to plan by the hours or if you want to do the full-time equivalent, which is a half a person, a full person, or a quarter of a person, that type of thing. Or if you're doing TBDs, you might want to plan 3 people. You can do that as well for the hours. So we'll do by hours for right now, and then I'll come back and switch it off to FTEs. So now it's the part where we're trying to identify what resources. So we have the ability to name a resource. If I wanted to plan for, Tom Brokaw, I can select him and plan just for him. Or I could do a multiple selection here and list the names with a comma in between it and do, Diane Sawyer. So I have the option to pull those names in. And let me just do a plan here. I'm going to plan this. So you can see here Tom's name came up for each of the different tasks that I have for my project and Diane's name. So you can see the view that I have here. It's the person and then all the tasks. Let's go back and let's change that up a little bit and let's do tasks for many people. You can see here I've got the task and then the option to pull those 2 people up for that task. So you can see the change in the view that I just made by the selection of the plan view. Now another thing is to select a person organization. So a whole person organization, I might do my PMO organization, which would be a group of people that worked in that person organization, they're associated with that person organization, so it would pull up those names. Another option is for me to show my TBD users, my TBD designated users based on that labor category that I showed earlier. So you can see here I can plan for that list of TBD users for each one of those tasks. The other thing is, let's see here, let me go reset here, labor category. Maybe I only wanted to plan those with the project manager labor category. Hopefully I've got a couple of people in here with that labor category. It looks like I've got a few here. So I'm searching not by a group or a name, but by who has the labor categories of project engineer and project manager. So another idea is to, maybe we'll be a little selective and be fortunate here to be able to select the location. We'll put in Maryland right now and see if I've got anyone in these resources here that are in Maryland. No, I don't have any Maryland workers in my system, but let's try Virginia. Oh, I've got a few working in Virginia. So you can see here I've got a subset of all of these resources here that have just these two labor categories that happen to have their base location in Virginia. And then finally, if I wanted to look at a certain certification or language or programming language, let's do Java for now, and we'll do whatever experience level, skill levels that I can come up with Java. I have the option to look at just those people with all of those selected skills. So let's see what comes up with in my searching criteria here. Oh, so I did narrow down a bit from those Virginia people, project manager, project engineer with Java skills, whatever level, all of those levels of Java skills. So now I've narrowed down my search for identifying those resources. So you can see how I have lots of different options here for who I'm going to put in the search criteria. Now down below here, I like to include these project task dates and showing the task budget hours as well as any subtotals here. Now if I want to do any leaf-only planning, if I've got a hierarchy of a work breakdown structure or tasks that I might only want to plan and eventually assign at the lowest leaf level, then I can show just those lowest leaf tasks. I don't have that, I just have one level right now. I can make sure that I don't see any inactive tasks. I don't have that in my situation. All my tasks are active. And only include the current plans for this project only. So I'm only looking at the plans with this project. Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, Donna Admin or Tom Brokaw couldn't be planned on other projects in the system, just planned. And so do I want to look at those plans and include those plans or not? So that's the option, to include just the plans for this project or not. And then finally, for the color by book percentage, I want to know, I can look here to see the utilization, the current planned booked utilization for these users. So let's go back and open it up a little bit so I can show you what that looks like here for my skill set. So you can see here I don't have any of these users planned from June through September just yet, or at least not on this project, and I might be planned a little bit, whatever is less than 50% on some other projects, but it's not showing here what those hours are, but it could be. So it looks like I have these people available to work on this project here. So let's go ahead and show the actual, how do I put in a set of hours here. So if I know that Donna Admin is a project manager and I want her to work on this project, you know, for the duration of the time, maybe, you know, 20 hours per semi-month here. So I would put in the 20 hours, save that, and it clicks in and fills in the entire row for the duration of periods here. So you can be very smart about the periods that you select. So maybe the project starts June 1st, but I know June 1st and June 16th she's only going to start, you know, to do 10 hours a month here, and then maybe it'll gear up a little bit. So I can change that in each one of these actual cells, and maybe it gears back down again at the end, or maybe it gears really up at the end. I could do that, and then save that plan. Now when I put in those hours, it's saving a plan of hours, and it's saving information about Donna working on this project, and it's got cost information coming from the way I've got the project set up for a person profile, and then the bill rate coming up for this time and materials project coming from the labor categories bill rate. So I'll be able to do some reporting on that. So let's say, okay, that's the only one that's going to work on the project management. Maybe for design, Chris Berman is going to work on that. Let's make him, let's do 80 hours maybe. Okay, so we filled in the entire row, and I could, easily update the hours, or I could update, each cell. Now, the other option is to click into the period by going to the June 1st here and clicking in here. Then I can plan by that period. Say everyone's going to start with a 40-hour semi-monthly period the first half of June, and it fills in 40 for the entire column or that period. That's the first semi-month. Or I can click into this box here where it says the word person. If I click in here and I do hours, let's just say 40 hours for every semi-monthly period, it's going to fill in 40 hours for every person in the matrix for every task in this case. So you can see how I'd want to be pretty selective if I wanted to do something like that. That's really, really easy to do, to fill it all in. So I'd want to be selective on who I pulled into the grid at that time and filled in what periods and what tasks. Okay, so right now if I save this, let's save it. When I save it, it will look at the booked percentage and say, well, you've got everybody working, 40, 60, way over 160 hours, 800 hours for that month for each one of the tasks, because you booked them on each one of the tasks. So you want to go back and maybe modify these to be, maybe Chris Berman, you take them off here. And if I resave that, you can see that they're back. He's probably still overbooked because of the other task here. Let's get him to a point where he's not overbooked. And maybe we'll have him just work on the test. Okay, so now you can see when I got it narrowed down, now he's green. He's somewhere in that 51 to 100% in booking, because I still have him assigned to work here on the training. Okay, is there any questions about the planning grid itself before I go look at some reporting on this?
Hi, yeah, we do have a couple questions. So,
okay, Zoe.
If you have a contract for period of performance that authorizes us to charge 1,920 hours or 1880, how do you handle that with planning to the pay period, which may make employees go over the total annual contracted amount?
Okay, so there's a couple of options there, I think. If you've got a total number of hours here, and the total hours is the contract hours, you can see here I could have, instead of the 976, it would be the 1920 hours here for that contract value. So you'd want to keep in mind that total here and compare that to the total hours you planned here. Now I've way over planned those 960 hours here, so I need to back off because I planned everybody all at once in the whole matrix here. So you can track that in the plan that you're creating here at this one project based on the fact that you put in that budget of hours at the project profile. That 976 hours is literally from, let me open up another link here to show you, from the project profile hours 976. So my recommendation is to put that period of performance 1920, and let's go back to, let's do a different thing here. Let me go back in here and clear this all out for everybody. Okay, and let's go back and do a search criteria. Yeah, we want to leave here. And let's change this up to period of performance, because I did hear period of performance. Let's take a look at that, and let's do FTE right now. Same people. So you see the period of performance here is based on, you know, the one period, June through 8, that contract period, and the amount that's there. I think I must not have cleared out everything here. I'll have to go back and I left the plans from the period. It's grayed out here because it's confused. This is the other thing, the tip that I wanted to tell you. You need to be consistent when you're planning. When you replan or play around with the different scenarios, you'll want to be consistent in the view that you plan, because right now it won't let you change this this cell here because it thought you were planning by semi-months. And now you've changed it to period performance, but you didn't zero those out. So it's confused about, well, what did you mean? Plan the semi-month planning periods, period over period, or the other. So, but this is what a period of performance would look like. You would assign Donna admin, full-time, half-time, et cetera, for all hour for that working that 3-month period. And you can see here I've got a subtotal here. Okay, hopefully that helps. And if you have more questions, you know, we're happy to work. Cam's happy to work with you. What I recommend, and I've done this with a number of customers, is kind of give you a one-on-one demo, talk about what your contract requirements are, and then you kind of maybe select a prototype project, and we kind of go in your system and help you create a plan, what that looks like, and then reporting on that. So we're happy to meet with you to do that.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Sure.
Is it possible to plan for a certain skill level as well, like maybe only advanced skills?
Yes, it actually is. So let me try to save this here. So if I'm looking for, let me save this first so I can clear it out. We have some good data. So here I can select, let's do the Java, right? And let's do just advanced. So I select just that one, or maybe I just want to do intermediate advanced and try to find someone in my list that has just those 2 levels or just that 1 level. So yes, absolutely. Good question.
Okay, terrific. And I just wanted to remind everybody that the PowerPoint is in the handout section on your GoToMeeting tab, and this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to our Knowledge Center by early next week. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for the reminder. So let's do this. Let's open up our people here a little bit more. We'll do. Let's see. And pull all those back up again. And let's do. I'm just going to do for grants here. You know, maybe 0.25 for everybody. I'm doing FTEs here. I thought. Save it. Did I change? Yeah, I did FTE. So I'm still overplanned everybody right now. So I need to be a little more selective about not overloading everyone. But it looks like everybody's probably overloaded by the training. So let's take them off of training and see if I can get her. Take George off of training right now. So you can see how I'm kind of maneuvering this around. Let's save it. And now we have a little bit better percentages here in our book utilization here. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Let's look at a report on that, though. I wanted to leave a few minutes here to look at some of the reports here. So let's go to the Reports tab. And the PowerPoint handout has toward the end, a screenshot of the reports page, and those reports that do have the ability to report on plans. Now, mind you, the prediction, the planning that we're doing here today is with that portfolio license, a project portfolio license, and the TBDs that are available are only with the project portfolio license, and it's the plus, or the financials portfolios license plus. So one of the key reports that I like to look at first is the periodic performance report. This is available with the portfolio license type, and it's going to show over a period, and I think our project started on June 6th, and it can show hours, FTEs, hours, and dollars or margins. I can compare plans to budgets and actuals. Now you'll see here I don't have budgets or actuals. I haven't assigned that plan yet, but I can look at the hours and the dollars, and here it's the dollars based on cost, those cost reports, the hour cost rate times the hours that I am potentially planning to work, right? And this is a T&M project. Just pretend this literally is a T&M project here. So for example, it's just literally cost times hours and bill times your hours. So I can try to look at this in a different view. And the great thing about this periodic performance report is it can show hours total charges, it can look at the differences, it can look at the plans from different plan sets, and I have the ability to look at billable charges as long as I have a billing viewer role to be able to see the dollars associated with this. I bet I don't have any bill rate associated with those labor categories right now. So what the problem is to be able to show the billable amounts. I can tell you that right now with those labor categories. But I can also look at costs. I can look at a more granular view of that. Maybe I'm going to look at the labor categories, look at it by labor categories for the project. As you can see here, I have my business analyst here. And maybe I want to look at the task level and be able to drill down a little bit further and distinguish the different tasks. So here you can see I've got labor category, here's my task, project management, here's design, here's code. So you can see the different costs and hours projected at the task level. And then I did use named people in this scenario here, so maybe I just want to show the people versus the labor category potentially. So here's Donna admin, here's George, and here's what he and she are planned to work on and the cost per semi-month or per month, and then the totals here. I go to meeting out here, and totals here, and then totals over the course of the entire project that I planned so far. So this periodic performance report is great to be able to show the plan versus the forecast. Now, think about it. If you have a plan that you like and you assign that plan, that will become the budget row here. And initially, it would be the same if you derive it from the plan. And then you'd be able to compare that to actuals that occur along the period of time. And think about it. If you have people that you have to do some reassignments because somebody's gone on vacation or you're behind or you need to add more people, you know, this budget line is usually what would be changing from your original baseline, your original plan. So you have the baseline here, the budget resource assignments that might change over the course of managing the project compared to the actuals at whatever granular level you need to see it with this periodic performance report. So this one's key, so keep a note of the project periodic performance report. The other report, and I'm talking a whole lot today because we're almost out of time, the other key report that I wanted to show is the cost summary and status report. Wow, this is the big one here that I want to show that now with our latest releases we have the ability to show different views of that. I have a default JSR, and I have the ability to show just on the plan. I haven't assigned anything yet. Created a budget. Remember the bubbles that I was showing, plan versus budget versus actual here. So let's look at plans, and I'm going to do quarter, and I think I've got 3/4 worth of data here, plans. Let's run that one to show the plan. This is the one that shows the labor and then any expenses. And I haven't planned any expenses yet, but I have the ability to plan and budget expenses, but applying any overhead costs, fringe, travel, fringe overhead, G&A, to get a total overhead overall project cost, and then compare that to revenue that I might be getting. It's time and materials, and it would have a bill rate. I have to have bill rates in the system right now for my plans, and compare that to the total revenue here, and see if I'm going to make money, what's my profit percentage that I'm going to make on that. So this one is key to look at the plan, but after you've created an assignments or resource assignments, you can look at that budget and then including the actuals, so you can do projections from actuals through today, June 9th, and then forwarded projections on assignments or plans going forward till the end of the contract. All right, so there are myriad of other reports and charts. The summary bar and line chart is a good one here to be able to look at labor based on the overall total labor totals compared to ODCs, and maybe I want to look here at total project costs and be able to chart that and also make that on trends. So let's do like that, and it's starting on June 6th. and my report. And so I've got a little bit of plans here to show that I've got labor total, I've got ODCs here for June, here's July, total labor, ODCs, and then the total project costs. Actually, I don't have any ODCs because I don't have any expenses, so it's labor and total costs because I have overhead costs in addition, and it's by month. The other thing is I could certainly report on multiple projects together. You know, maybe all of these 4 projects make up my contract, and so I could look at that as an overall. I have a few ODCs on one of those projects. And then I could add some trending lines to this, cumulative lines here, and roll it all. I've got all of these rolled up into one view in the graph. So I can see some trending lines here and then be able to come to a point and drill down to a detail of where that is for that, for those. So it's a lot of options here for those periods. Not great data because I don't have revenue coming in, enough revenue. Another report would be the forecast report. I do like to show the forecast report because it has the ability to show these projects here, starting in 6-1, reporting on plans, again looking at hours and dollars, showing projects, maybe tasks, margins, and including actuals as well. All right, any questions on some of the reporting options here?
Hi, Sherry. Nope, we don't have any questions on the reporting section.
Okay. Okay. We are almost out of time here. Really, the PowerPoint has other pictures of some of the reports and graphs. Again, the important thing is to play around with the planning grid and see how that looks in deriving cost, overhead cost, and looking at profit, revenue, etc. If you want us to work with you one-on-one, we're happy to get on a go-to-meeting with you, and we can play around in a system, a scenario in our demo system, or we can play around with a project in your system and look at that. So planning grid, think about planning and assigning plans with the one button when you go to your planning grid, creating the budgets, and then comparing that to actuals at whatever level of granularity that you have in the system. So there you go. All right, we'll hang on a little bit if you have other questions. Thank you for joining us. We had a big crowd today, and be sure to look and register for the webinar coming up in 2 weeks.